This episode of Podcast Portugal is brought to you by expatsportugal.com, your trusted online community for everything related to moving to, living in, or investing in Portugal. What really sets Expats Portugal apart is its welcoming, knowledgeable community. Whether you're just starting to explore the idea of life in Portugal or you're already settling in, you'll find live webinars, expert Q&As, member discounts, a vibrant forum, and friendly in-person meetups happening across the country. And just for Podcast Portugal listeners, you can get 15% off membership by using the code Podcast Portugal at checkout. That's Podcast Portugal, all one word and in caps. Visit expatsportugal.com today and start your Portugal journey with the support of people who've been there, done that, and are ready to help you do it too. This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal. I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to Chris. Chris is from New Zealand. And Chris, tell us a little bit more about your story and what you're doing in Portugal. And let's go.
Sure. Thank you, Justin. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I have been here for 7 years. I came the first time in 2012, traveling with my girlfriend at the time. And you said you'd grown up in the Middle East, but our trip started, it was actually a trip focused on the Middle East. And my girlfriend was wearing a burqa. I was wearing a dish dash. We were having this very unusual experience. But the whole trip started in Porto, of all places. And I think, when I think back on that, I think that it was illustrative of the fact that in 2012, especially for a New Zealander, Portugal was very much off the beaten path. So we spent a couple of weeks in Portugal in 2012, and then years went by, and I came back when I was working for a company in the UK, and we were looking to open up an office in Lisbon in 2016, 2017, which didn't go ahead. But then I moved back in 2018 into 2019 and set up my business, which is a commercial property investment business. And I've got offices throughout the country. And I've been here for 7 years since then. And now I have a wife that I met here. I have a Portuguese child named Vasco.
Hey, great.
And obviously I've written, And obviously I've written a book about the history of the country.
Yes, the Tugas. Meet the Tugas.
Meet the Tugas.
In Portuguese, conhece do Tugas. And how is your Portuguese? Because I also have a Portuguese wife and a Portuguese son. Oh, half Portuguese son.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. How old's your boy?
Yeah. He's 18 months. He's just
started
his first day.
Young one.
He's just started his first day at creche today, which is I think bigger for us than it is for him.
Yeah. Where are you living?
He gets to play with toys. We're living in Estrela.
Say again, sorry?
I'm sorry, in Lisbon.
Okay, nice. How are you finding the crash and everything? Is it all really good, or you haven't obviously you went to check it out, meet the teachers and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, this is our first day. This is our first experience. It seemed charming, and the teachers seemed very nice. I think that's one of the things about Portugal. I'm sure you found the same thing, is that there's a real focus on family and kids.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. I've got nothing to compare it against, but when my wife was pregnant, for instance, she was led to the front of the line constantly. Or when we have a little kid, we sort of are given privileges.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice. To answer your question, the creche seems nice. It seems charming. Teachers, it's nice.
Yeah, and it's often and I think I sort of get asked here is like, oh, so what's the schooling and how's your boy fit in and everything like that, and my team sort of, what I found about Portugal is we have to work a lot, and I know that it's a kind of bit of a shift in the working environment, over the last few years. Both often in Portugal, both partners have to work. Or choose to work, and therefore sort of the crash or the extended family becomes really important in that. Our extended family is a little bit older. My mom's living in the UK, and my wife's parents, they're just up the road, an hour and a half up the road in Isitao. But they, look after my team for a day or so, but he hasn't yet slept over at his grandparents. That's a big new mission that he's going to go for. But my team's cousin, the grandparents are there picking up from school and taking to school and because
Nice.
both parents have to work, and I think that family unit is really important. The involvement of grandparents in family life, I think in some other countries is perhaps lacking, and we still tend to have to hand our kids over to professionals. Now, there's good professionals, and like anything, there is not so good professionals, and also there is there's good family members and not so good family members. But it's a it's a trust issue, right?
But I think that's probably. I mean, I think that's probably true of the modern world generally. But I mean, having both parents working is probably true of a lot of the West now. Which might be, one of the reasons why the fertility rate's dropping. It's interesting. I'm seeing, across my peers, the lack of kids amongst my peers is crazy compared to the previous generations.
Yeah.
Except in Australia.
How old are you, Chris?
I just turned 40.
Okay, so I'm 50. Was it 52? My team is 5. So yeah, we're similar boat really, and I think. Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know when that shift came, because there was the sort of that ideal, probably we could say 1980s USA, where you have the sort of long-term career prospect and you're working in a job which has a future and you're looking forward to your pension and your retirement. Your wife perhaps is at home and she's a home carer. She's looking after the home, which actually, in my opinion, is a full-time job and should be recognized as that fact, because looking after kids and preparing the home and educating, I mean, that's a massive role. And I kind of get a little bit worried in the modern day when we're both going out working. It's like, well, who's looking after the home? And is this going to be reflected in future generations?
Yeah, society changes and values change with it. But, that idea that you're talking about, that sort of American nuclear family, in the time, the justification at the time it still seems rational. There was, you sort of had this image of God above, then the father, God protecting the family, the father protecting, I think it was God protecting this country, and then the country protects the family, the father protects the family, the mother protects the children. Obviously there's misogynistic things about that. But there's a rationale behind it, even though it doesn't quite adapt to the modern world. But there's certainly a rationale about it. But I think the world's just changing, and there's always teething issues with change.
So the statistics do confirm that. You think that we have birth rates that are falling. Parents are probably getting a little bit older and maybe having less kids. And they tend to be the parents that perhaps are in careers and maybe more career motivated. And yet on the other end of the scale, perhaps we're getting, this might be a little bit controversial, but we might have people that are earning money from the state for having kids. I mean, that's at the very far at the other end of the scale, so you might be having families that maybe struggling a little bit with 8 kids, and they think, well, we're getting money for having kids, so why not just keep having a bunch of kids? And so we're increasing the population of kids which are coming from more difficult backgrounds, and that's a kind of interesting dynamic as well, I think.
Yeah, that's that challenge is across the world really, and New Zealand talks about it as well. Obviously the UK talks about that. I mean, I think that's probably on the margin, I would say. I think, there's a myriad of factors of why fertility rates are dropping. I think one of the major ones is that women don't necessarily want to simply be in the house. They want to ride their careers just like everyone does.
Mm.
And so it's difficult. I mean, did you say, when you refer to team, are you saying your family? As in you're a team of 5, as in that's your family? Is that what you're saying?
I don't remember when I said team.
Oh, do you have 3 kids? Am I getting that right?
No. Wait, we just have my team. Yeah, we just have my team at the moment.
Oh, my team.
My team. Yeah, my team.
My team.
Yeah, my team. I'll say it more Portuguese. My team.
My team. Okay, right. Okay. Got it. Yeah, well, I mean, look, 1 kid is difficult.
Yeah, I know, man. Well, actually, I have faced the argument that maybe 2, particularly from Rita, she's saying, well, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 kids will be less difficult because they could all play with each other and look after each other. And I'm actually coming around to that. Yeah, I'm coming around to that theory. For sure.
We will have two. We will have two.
Yeah.
I think three. And then and that just means the population stays the same. To increase the population, you need more than two.
Yeah,
And we
2.6,
can't
isn't
do
it? You
that.
need more than 2.6.
Something like that. Yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting though. I mean, thinking about my peers, when I think about my Australian peers, and Australia is. So I went to school and university in Australia, but Australia is one of the richest countries on earth. And if you look at the wealth as opposed to income, it is the richest country on earth because house prices are so much. But if I see amongst my peers who have better access to capital, they've got 3 kids. So it could simply be a financial thing. Life today is much harder when house prices are the way they are, rentals are the way they are. This is, a Western phenomena. And maybe it is just not possible to have 3 kids in that environment. Whereas in Australia, where people are wealthy and the standard of living is very high, it is.
Yeah. I can only argue from our anecdotal experiences. Like Rita was like, I'm not interested. I've done my career when I was younger and I want to devote all my time to bringing up kids and looking after the house. That would be her ultimate goal.
Great.
And, maybe having some side sort of online business and things, which just keeps her in the loop, But
or
maybe,
get more putting the kids to work. Send
Yeah.
the kids into the field.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I actually do that. My team is a great labourer. He really helps me. He loves it as
3
well.
employees.
Yeah, I set him a lot of tasks. Is your son? You have a son or a daughter?
He's a son, Vasco.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Vasco. We already said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you'll realize, like, sort of 4 to 5 years old, they'll start following dad around everywhere, and in the most important thing is, from my perspective, anyways, to give them tasks. They love tasks, give them something to do, because otherwise they drive you a little bit crazy.
Yeah, my son's tasks at the moment are destroying things. Anything I'm reading will be destroyed.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that I found sort of like my involvement in my son's life sort of grew a little bit more as he got a bit older. Like the first months, he just sort of looked at me. And then a little bit later, it's almost like as his consciousness grows, then he's going, who's this guy that comes and goes and has a big beard and, and is rough with me, and as opposed to sort of mom cuddles and breastfeeding and all that. I think it's nice to see that evolving awareness of father and mother and the differences.
Well, there are definitely differences. I mean, the role that my wife plays in his life is very different to mine. And then, I am rough and tumble with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes through these sort of daddy phases, then he goes through mummy phases, daddy phases.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It is interesting that, my wife plays a very, a caring role. If he gets hurt, he runs straight to her.
Yeah, exactly.
And if he wants to play, he runs straight to me.
Yeah. Exactly. It's exactly. It seems like a pattern in for most, highest proportion anyway, for sure. Let's go back to a little bit to that birth rate, because I think also, we're sort of trying to understand why the birth rate is falling a little bit. And I certainly think that it might also be health. There could also be health reasons for why the birth rate is falling. There's a lot of evidence out there about low fertility and microplastics, and perhaps these types of things are played down a little bit in the politics of our era.
I think there's more and more recognition. I mean, if you look at the quality of sperm, it's been declining steadily since the 70s.
Okay.
And there's theories around that. Microplastics is one of the leading theories. But the thing is, and no doubt that would maybe knock off, I'm 40, so if I go for my second child next year, it's going to be more difficult for me than it would have been in the past. But that's, when I see my peers that live here, they're not having kids due to the fact that they can't. They're not having kids because they don't want the kids.
Really?
That's, I think, well, kind of. I mean, there's suddenly been an explosion amongst my friends in the last 6 months of everyone getting pregnant. So maybe,
yeah.
Who knows?
Did you discuss it with them? Did they just basically flat out say, not right now? And what are they, about 40 years old as well? And
yeah, 35 to 40, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things is life is just so much more exciting than it has been in previous generations. Everyone travels now. If you look at the travel numbers coming into Europe, especially into Portugal, everyone takes trips, whereas previously that was just not accessible to anyone, really. And so life offers so much more, whereas previously, maybe having a child was the single most exciting thing of one's life, where now, the world is incredible and it's becoming more and more incredible and more accessible. And so I think, when you're 29 years old, do you want to have a kid anymore? Or do you want to continue traveling or trying a new career?
Mm-hmm. Well, and also maybe our life expectancy. Well, possibly not our life expectancy is extended, but perhaps our age. How am I going to describe this? Perhaps like the new 50 is what maybe 20 years ago was. You were feeling like more like 70 at 50, but now 50, you're feeling more like a sort of 20-year ago 30-year-old. So that could also be it. Like
Justin, I saw on Instagram a photo of you punching a boxing bag. I mean, you look like a 30-year-old.
Thank you. Not so much at the moment. Right now, I busted my leg doing jiu-jitsu, and I've been out of training for like 3 months and just getting back into it now. And it's a struggle with fragility of age. Since turning 50, I've really noticed a big difference. Talking about health and hormones and all those kind of things, I've certainly noticed a big difference in physical abilities, because my mind still wants to roll in jiu-jitsu like I was 40, but my body is starting to pay the price. It's also paying the price for rugby, paying the price for mixed martial arts and surfing, and just basically paying the price for being active, and I'm sort of, going at the moment on how to keep extending that. But once you get an injury, you get knocked backwards. It's hard to recover again. So it's kind of a nice thing that I'm battling with at the moment, fragility and recovery and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I noticed in my hangovers, definitely. One of the good things about living in Portugal in that regard is that the quality of the food here is very good. And so my wife and I, for instance, every Saturday go to a farmer's market, and the food is fantastic. It's all organic.
Yeah.
Whereas, we've traveled a bit in America, and the food is not organic. And all the issues associated with that.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is a difficult thing. I think it's almost by luck rather than by, here in Portugal, because of the way the farming structures are set up. There isn't the ability to have huge fields and huge monocultures. Here, just the way that it's been handed down through generations and then divided by multiple inheritance. Descendants. It's kind of fractured the lands up into smaller pieces in between valleys where the water is, and it's just the structure of the land, I think.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's a default level of more
regenerative, more traditional farming, like even down to like, because we live on a farm, we farm olives, we grow our own food, and like the sheep, we have a neighbor who's a sheep farmer, and his sheep just go around all the different olive fields and all the different fruit tree fields and just trim the grass. So they're not using chemicals, and they're not using anything to treat the weeds, and it works amazing, because it could also be a cost factor, because there's a massive investment in machinery, massive investment in liquidity here in Portugal. Is not easy to come by. So it could also be that factor, and the cost of chemicals. And by sort of luck, we've ended up in this situation where a lot of the land here is very healthy.
Yeah, that is very interesting, because I've noticed that across society in Portuguese society generally, is that capitalism kind of arrived late to this society. And so it's skipped some negativity of this that's associated with capitalism. And as at the same time, things are much slower here. The style of business here is much slower than other places in the world. So, it's a double-edged sword. But nonetheless, they've skipped a lot of the negativity.
I think there's also a reservation to it's like a little bit of a tall poppy syndrome. They go for job security and then family weekends, as opposed to sort of like massive career aspirations. I mean, speaking really generally, I think, but there is that sort of there is a little bit of sort of there is a bit of not trusting entrepreneurs as well in some aspects of society here.
I agree, to their detriment.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the big the thing for the future, and it's something that I argue for a lot. Is we need a lot of investment in entrepreneurs, and that's entrepreneurs that move here or local entrepreneurs, and we need to get those Portuguese immigrants back into Portugal with their qualifications and being more entrepreneurial, even if that means training. And certainly the kids, how to run a business, how to take your skills. If there is not the job here, if there is not the infrastructure to be an employee, you need to make the infrastructure. You need to make the business. You need to create the idea, and then you'll be able to employ other people here.
I agree. I think it's changing. And, this government at the moment is they've introduced tax breaks for returning immigrants. And there's so much money going through the system at the moment that I think things are changing. But you're right. That one of the problems I think Portugal faces is the lack of high-paying, high-quality jobs. 25% of this country's economy is generated by tourism, which is great because it's kind of free. We're an open-air museum. People just come to us. But the jobs generated by that are generally low-skilled jobs. And so if 25% of your economy is generating low-skilled jobs, they're not bright prospects for the children.
No. And it's also the psychological aspect that you're serving people that have more money than you as well. It's a definite psychology there. And then the flip side is like, well, as a business owner of a tourist thing, how do I employ a cleaner? And many of the cleaners, the availability or a builder, for example, is going to be foreign immigrants coming in that will be prepared to take those jobs. So you also have that dynamic to sort of consider.
Yeah. I mean, true wealth always comes from productivity gains, and there's very few productivity gains you can get from the tourism industry. But, I see my wife and I have a company here called Paco Services, and we have 16 staff in 2 offices in Porto and Lisbon. And we are seeing now incorporating AI. I mean, this is obviously a common thing to say, but we are incorporating AI into our business, and we're increasing the productivity of our staff. And through that, our company is becoming more profitable, and we're paying higher wages. And it's that productivity gain, which is where the source of wealth is.
That's
being
interesting.
Able to get more from less or more from the same.
Yeah, that's an interesting spin on the AI, because always the sort of general concern about AI is it replaces people. But if it can increase productivity and increase salaries, that's a big win for everybody.
Totally. I mean, do you want your son being taught by a computer?
No.
It's not.
But in some aspects, yeah. Some things, maybe, He learns a terrible lot unfortunately, he learns a lot from YouTube. Luckily, it's sort of survival things but he's always getting hold of my axe and hacking at wood and making spears and firing homemade bows and arrows around the house. So, there is.
Well, that sounds.
That's cool, but it's also like, okay, then there's the human learning that you need to add to that. It's like, okay, you can't fire a bow and arrow in the house at people. You understand? There's that thing he learns from YouTube. That's
a real lesson.
Yeah, exactly. So that
doesn't want to learn himself. He want to learn the hard way.
So there's the technology, but you also need that human element added in there.
Yeah, and we always will.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm sure we will. Things like the Yeatsian guy always kind of goes to extremities in one point and then spins around and returns.
Yeah. I think to that point about the jobs creation and the style of business here, what I found in researching for my book is that this country, and it's probably true of a lot of countries. It is true of a lot of countries, that there are regions, and the regions are quite different. And so the region in the north, centered around Porto, the business style up there is much more Anglo-Saxon than it is further south. And it's kind of a gradient, because then you get to the Algarve and, it's very much about lifestyle. Whereas in the north, people work, and I see it. I see it in my interactions with people up there, the responsiveness of emails, the go-getterness.
Interesting.
I prefer to do business in the north. I think people are really, they're trying hard to make money.
Yeah. Do you think it's the cold? It's paying the heating bills? I have a philosophy on that. You did the good weather and the good times. You just go outside and walk around, and you don't need to pay for that. The sun is free, But when it's cold and raining, and you need to pay for heating.
Yeah. Well, it's true of Europe. There's always the divide between Northern Europe and Southern Europe, and there's all the stereotypes about that.
Yeah.
So maybe there is some truth to that. I think the interesting thing. Obviously, there's been such a long history of UK and especially Porto interaction, trade history. With the wine and the port, that there is an Anglo-Saxon element to the style of things up there, but also there's the mountain range of Serra da Estrela, which connects down into the Sintra Mountains, and the Celts, thousands of years ago, but they occupied the north of that mountain range, not the south.
Okay.
And so there's these cultural differences that have developed over thousands of years that I think combined create the style of living and the style of business acumen in the north.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's difficult to talk about these types of things because we can also sort of start thinking about genetics and doing genetic studies of people in the south, people in the north. Is it the weather? Is it a genealogy? Is it and it starts to get a little bit. You can be controversial in many ways. Because
there are genetic. I mean, if you go to the north and you'll see red-headed Portuguese walking around.
Yeah, and more sort of Arabesque, maybe towards the Algarve, and more sort of
really
from
completely. I mean, the olive skin that you associate with Portuguese is very sort of Algarvian thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And then it's this country is so old that. There's so much variation that's been baked into it. I mean, the Azorians, for instance, are very different to the Madeirans, and the Azorians are completely their own people.
Yeah. I mean, you can understand that because there's more isolation. But if you imagine Portugal, perhaps if you have, like you were saying, the isolated regions because of a mountain range, but you would think in a country as small as Portugal, that most people would just eventually over time blend together into a people. But then you do have these variations and strong cultural differences.
You would think that, but then, I mean, so you said you're an hour and a half from Azatão? So are you along the...
Yeah, so we're south. We're in Alentejo, so we're about 30 minutes inland from Porto Covo.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what sort of Grandola?
A little bit further north than that, yeah. So if you drew a line from Porto Covo to Beja, we're about sort of nearer the highway on that east-west line, yeah. Yeah,
interesting.
It's very rural. It's very farming. We have the big olive producers around here. We have different sort of sectors of society for sure that you can see. There's a sort of a lot of people here were sort of left behind in many respects. Perhaps they couldn't afford to send their kids to university or whatever, and they sort of stayed here and struggled a little bit because there's lack of jobs, lack of things to do. And then you get a lot of people that have been able to sort of get to university, and you'll have families that have stayed. Even my wife's family, because her family's from Serpa, but they moved to Almada for work. They returned a little bit to Alentejo to work, but then they sort of set up in Azatão. But they're originally from Alentejo, and I think it tends to be the case. People will move out of the farming jobs into the city and get qualified. And now what we're seeing is people returning and setting up businesses here, which is really cool. It
is cool. And I've seen it myself. I mean, that's true of the world. The whole world is shifting from rural environments into urban environments. But I've seen the return as well. I mean, if you go, in Estremoz, and where else have I been? There was another spot I went. I think it was... I can't remember. Elvish.
Yeah. Fantastic place.
Which is an amazing place.
Yeah.
But I've seen, only in restaurants, but I've seen Lisbon chefs that had grown up in Alentejo, that had gone to Lisbon, that had started a restaurant there, and then they're returning in their mid-30s. And there's a couple of restaurants in Estremoz that's owned by a husband and wife, and they're fantastic. Yeah. They're excellent restaurants. Yeah. But it's those returnees coming back on the wave of so much, tourism going into the interior of Alentejo.
Yeah, it's still the early days, but I think the potential is massive. I mean, if you just
massive
from where we are, like you can almost, if you go towards Porto Covo, you can almost like double and triple and quadruple the house pricing as closer you get to the coast. Initially,
then you get to Comporta, which is madness.
Which is madness, yeah. So, I mean, a house like ours was, actually, a house like a farm like ours, but in a completely ruined state, would be near $500,000, and that's 30 minutes inland from the coast. So I can understand, like, if Portuguese people out there, if you're struggling with the housing situation in Lisbon, if you're paying €700 to rent a room in a house, a shared house, come move back to Alentejo and work remotely. Put a Starlink on your roof, and you can work remotely, and you can have a nice property for your family. You can work into it. Okay.
Yeah, that interior of Alentejo, I mean, there's always been quite separate. If you look at the voting patterns, post the 1974 revolution, the communists, which took a big portion of the vote, they've always traditionally been centered around Alentejo, and they remain so.
Yeah,
and then in this latest election, Chega was very much voted in that region in Alentejo.
Yeah.
So it's always been a poor area. It's always been the poor area of Portugal.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The dynamic here is I can see arguments for both sides of the political spectrum, which is interesting.
Oh, sure.
So I'm plonked right in the middle, really, because I can see my friends who have like big pomegranate farms and things, who need immigration for labor. It's a requirement for their product to be competitive and to sell to Tesco's in the UK and stuff like that. But I can also see it from Rita, my wife's perspective, that when she has big gangs of men roaming around the supermarket and without the similar cultural sort of traits as people she's grown up with, she can find it intimidating. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a foreign person. She said, like, it could just be any group of 20, 30 men. A woman can kind of feel a little bit uneasy, So I can see it from both sides of the perspective, really.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, I've had these conversations multiple times, and I was talking about, if you look at the greatest city on earth, which would say is potentially New York. I mean, what's the nationality of New York? There isn't one. I don't think people are against immigration. I think the thing is that immigration has happened so quickly in this country and on such scale. And, in researching for my book, I went through granular detail throughout the country, and especially in Alentejo. And some of these towns, which have been emptied of Portuguese, there might be 20% of the population remaining who are elderly people. They've had huge, for better or worse, whatever, but the big Bangladeshi communities who have moved there, for better or worse. But for those 20% that have remained, that is such a drastic change to occur in 5 years that, there's always going to be some abrasiveness.
Which is interesting to see why they vote so left, so communist, because the communists are sort of welcome.
Well, traditionally they have, but in this latest election they voted Chega. I think the interesting thing about the communists is that, the Communist Party still exists today, proper hammer and sickle, and it's because they had so much respect during the Salazar years, because they were the one political group that continued to fight the dictatorship and no one else did.
In back rooms of libraries and things like that, and bookstores, they used to have little back rooms where they used to sit and plot the downfall of Salazar.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. And in the end, they did nothing. There wasn't even their responsibility, the result of them. But but then the other thing about Alentejo was it was almost a semi-feudal situation. You had big landowners and you had very poor mass numbers of workers. And so when that got flipped on its head at the end of the revolution, when the revolution happened, the natural swing of the pendulum went to communists. And rather than having this single landowner and a mass amount of poor people, you're going to communalize, you're going to put everything into the communal basket. And so, there was a natural post-revolution, there was a natural shift towards communism in Alentejo.
Yeah, and perhaps the big landowners maybe moved in, they kept the properties, but maybe they moved into Lisbon or the surrounding area.
They did. And I've met a number of them. The houses were, it wasn't ransacked, but the houses were taken over and they were forced out.
I heard that. It's a big story around here for the very same thing. There was a big olive farm just up the road which had that very same thing. They literally came in with guns and defended with guns, and it was very, very interesting story.
Yeah, I don't think it was in my experience, at least, and what I've discovered, there was never violent, but there was obviously resistance. But
Yeah,
ultimately, what could they do? You had the entire people rising up against a single individual family. I mean, what could
yeah,
that family do?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly a really interesting history. Um,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's the theme, the main theme of your book. Let's talk about a little bit more about your book, actually, because I'm sure readers and listeners are going to be super interested to hear about it and pick it up. This episode of Podcast Portugal is brought to you by Algarve Care Services, offering professional, reliable English-speaking home care and lifestyle support across the Algarve, and now expanding into Coimbra, Lisbon, Cascais, Sintra, and Porto over the next few months. Whether you're retiring here, supporting an aging parent, or simply seeking someone you can trust with day-to-day life, Algarve Care Services brings compassion, local knowledge, and real peace of mind to families from all over the world. Now, this is a type of service that's really close to my heart. My father died this last year, fairly recently, and he was suffering for over 25 years with Parkinson's disease. It was a real concern before he died for my family members because my father was an ex-England rugby player. He was 6'4". Although he'd lost a lot of weight, my mum used to say to me, "How am I going to move this guy out of bed?" Because he no longer could walk. In the UK, it would have taken 4 care providers to help him just to go for the bathroom every day. So, we'll be speaking with Kelly Dugmore from Algarve Care Services and founder. She is also the CEO in an upcoming episode to learn more about her story and her mission to make care in Portugal more dementia-friendly and accessible to those with mobility issues. Visit algarvecare.com via the link in the show notes to see how they can support your life here in Portugal. So, Chris, tell us, you talked briefly a little bit about Paco Services, so maybe we could go to a little bit more depth about what Paco Services is or are, and also a little bit about your book. It would be nice to sort of go into a bit of detail of what that's all about and what brought you to write a book.
Sure. Paco Services. My wife and I started it maybe 4 years ago now. It was set up to attend to issues that foreigners were having when they were coming to Portugal. I mean, at the time, there are a lot of foreigners obviously arriving into Portugal, but at the time it was more of a trickle compared to what it is now. And so we had an office in Lisbon. We had a small number of staff, and we were just helping with various day-to-day issues, dealing with customers, dealing with bureaucracy, dealing with government on their behalf, running errands, just making life easier for our clients. And then, obviously, the number of foreigners started really skyrocketing into Lisbon. And so our business started growing. So now we have 16 staff. We have 2 offices, one in Porto, one in Lisbon. We assist with our clients' business lives. We assist with their personal lives. We are essentially a personal assistant, but we integrate entirely with their lives, and we are on demand. So I'm sure you're aware, but hiring someone in Portugal can be quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's complicated like many things in Portugal just because you don't know the processes. And there are additional processes just naturally with this country, which is, quite bureaucratic. But once you overcome the processes, it's more straightforward. But for our clients who just want to be able to pay someone to come and help them without going through the process of paying Social Security, hiring an accountant to process that payroll, etc., we offer that service. So they can come to us and say they might need 20 hours of support a month, and we can offer that. We can give them a dedicated personal assistant that will be able to help them throughout the country. The fact that we have 2 offices means we can do things on their behalf in Porto. And so we help our clientele with a range of issues, ongoing issues.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it seems really helpful because I came, I didn't have any help really. I just sort of stumbled around for a long time, scratching
It's
my
natural.
my head about which office I should go to and which piece of paper I should carry.
I still don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So having that help, it helps a lot now having a Portuguese wife who can. Well, actually, she tends to deal with all that side of the thing, side of our businesses.
Well,
Anyway.
they're your options.
Yeah.
If you might move to the country, have a Portuguese wife or a Portuguese or Paco Services service.
Yeah, but you know what? I've often found that even the people that you're going to in the offices don't really know the next step or what you actually require. You know, they'll say you require something, but then you find out later on down the line that you either didn't or you need something else.
I see that often. You know, there is this to be fair to Portugal, a lot of the stuff that Portugal offers compared to France, for instance, is far more advanced. I mean, you know, the government has really made an effort to put everything online. So you can do a lot. If you know your way around the online services, you can really achieve a lot.
Yeah.
But as part of that, there's a lot of, I think there's actually a government ministry now that's dedicated solely to modernizing all the government services. But what that means is that new systems are being built on top of old systems.
Yeah.
And so you do often find that you go to a desk and they won't know what document or what process to follow.
Yeah.
And you know, I have Paco Services and I have a commercial property company, and so I'm constantly dealing with the municipality in Lisbon. And very often, the person I'm speaking to won't necessarily know what's the right process to upload documents.
Yeah, and everything happens so
crazy,
such rapid change. Everyone's catching up. You know, it's understandable.
Yeah, it is exactly. I think these are teething issues. I mean, I think Portugal in 5 years will be a very different place.
Yeah, I'm also. I saw some warning for the. It's not called CEF anymore, but it's called something else. I'm AIMA. That's right. I did see an email going around saying if you receive any emails from that look like they're from AIMA, they're not. You will be receiving official aima.gov.pt emails, but you also may be receiving emails from CEF, but even though CEF doesn't exist anymore, so it was like really, it was a kind of an email to help people not get scammed, but it was so confusing that
Yeah, the way what you've just described to me, I don't know what the outcome is.
Yeah. And you know what? For the services that you provide, I was like, why do I want to spend my time doing mind-numbing administration, especially because I'm really bad at it as well. It's much more cost-effective of my time to pay somebody else to do it with the experience and can did it, and with the connections, and to do it much quicker than I can. And I can dedicate my time to actually earning money in the only way I kind of know how, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, our clientele, the clientele we have, they're high achievers. They're impressive people that our clients are. And they simply want to maximize, you know, they leverage our staff to maximize their time in the day. Yeah. So we say to them, you know, you can 10x your time in the day because you've got someone to leverage to do those things for you. And especially with things when it comes to procrastination. So a lot of our clients use our team as, you know, they integrate them into their businesses. And so those tasks, when you think to yourself, God, I wish if I just didn't procrastinate, I'd do X. You can put that to the team.
Yeah.
You can say that to our staff. You can say, look, this is what I need. And our staff will go and do it for you because they have to do it for you. And so, you know, we see
the limit is just by hours, I guess. I'm noticing from your packages, the sort of entry packages, €349 euros a month for 10 hours. And that's a good deal actually, because you know you can spend. If I sort of farm my time out, say for surf coaching, I farm my time out for maybe €80 an hour, something like that. I can easily spend 3-4 hours sitting in some place. It's going to cost me a fortune, you know, sitting in some office building.
Yeah, that's right. And now I've seen it with my clientele. I mean, they've opened up businesses and they've needed the support, and you know, we provide that support. And so, what is the value of your time? Just as you're saying, Justin, you know, if the value of your time is €80 an hour, then spending €34 an hour or less if you get a bigger package is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a slightly different subject, but I saw a very funny post the other day that was saying how men, is a nice generalization here, how men like to look at doing a €100 DIY job at home, but they'll spend €600 on it on tools and then take twice as long.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of similar, right? It's
I'm, I mean, I mean, I'm unnecessarily frugal about inconsequential things.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like kind of misplaced frugalness, I guess. It's the same on a farm. Like I do the same thing. Like dishwasher's broken, I'll scratch my head. I'll chat GPT it, and I'll take it apart. I'll spend hours doing it, and realize I have to order some part from somewhere, and then I have to try to work out which part it is, and then I say, why did I just not go and buy a new dishwasher?
Yeah, that's right. Or give it to Paco, and they'll take care of it all.
Really?
You just say to Paco, well, they won't come and unscrew it, but they,
yeah. But you'll find someone in Alentejo that can come along, because we tried to get a repair, and nobody answered any phones. we
would definitely try.
Yeah,
they would definitely try.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean that's, and actually there was, I got an email today from a guy who at first I thought, okay, he's doing one of these, he's doing like a property and making a sort of eco center, and I was like, okay, another one of these emails, like he wants me to invest or whatever, but he wanted to talk to me about it on the podcast. And he's like, I've just been to an ashram and a yoga retreat, and we've been thinking about a project, and now we're a lot down the line, and I was thinking, oh no, it's going to be a little bit of land with some teepees, somewhere in the valley of somewhere in Algarve. And then he sent me a link to this website, and I was just like blown away. It's absolutely amazing. This place, it's like a shared community of 60 villas that you can buy in Ericeira. And I was just like, wow, this place looks amazing. And his concept and website was just fantastic. It just goes to show.
I'm curious.
Yeah, actually, I just completely lost my train of thought then, why I started talking about this guy's thing. Yeah, okay. What were we talking about before that?
It does illustrate the amount of things that are going on in Portugal right now. And that's
exactly.
That story, these big developments in the interior is a very common story.
Yeah, and also my prejudice, my prejudice when somebody starts talking about yoga and ashrams and things, I immediately think sort of 2 or 3 teepees in the Algarve, rather than this plan.
I share that prejudice.
yeah, that was awesome. But tell us about the book, Meet the Tugas.
Meet the Tugas, exactly. It has been taken 4 years to do.
Yeah.
Because it was the book came about because there were so few, almost no English books when I arrived talking about the history of the country. Mm-hmm. There's a well-known book called Os Portuguese, The Portuguese by Barry Hatton, and that gives a very good overview of who the Portuguese are and the Portuguese nation. But it had been published in 2009. And it's continually republished every year. Then there's The Conquerors, which is a great book, but specifically about the explorers. It's a fantastic book, but it's very specific. But otherwise, there are books starting to appear. But when I started writing this, there were basically none. And it was such a shame, because the Portuguese history is completely fascinating.
Well, it's world-changing.
And it extends...
World-changing.
Yeah, it's definitely world-changing. It's, I talk about this in my book in the sense that Portugal has shaped the world and has been shaped by the world significantly. I mean, it's kind of bobs on the ocean and the waves just take it out. But, it was a tiny nation of 3 million people, and it discovered the route to India and opened up the whole entire age of exploration, sort of fired the starting gun on the age of exploration. That is an extremely impressive feat. But on top of that, it's just been pushed around by global forces, Napoleon's invasion, the English interaction, World War I. The interesting thing about Portugal, I mean, this is true of so much of the world. The world is fascinating no matter wherever you go. The thing about Portugal is that the history extends back continuously for thousands of years, but the country itself is almost 1,000 years old. Whereas Spain sort of came about 500 years ago, Germany came about 150 years ago, the same with Italy. Portugal's had a continuous, solid, defined border for 1,000 years, and it's got a whole history deep into its culture, inside the interior. And so the point is that this history was just waiting to be told, and no one was telling it. And it seemed crazy, especially as so many English speakers were arriving to this country.
Yeah.
And so, so over the past 4 years, well, over the previous 4 years, I'd gone through granular detail in every single part of this country, from top to bottom, east to west, all the islands. every time I had sort of 5 days free, I would draw up a extremely detailed itinerary and then rapidly go through that part and knock off a small section of the country. And over time, I'd covered the entire area. And so now I tell that story. I tell the story. I mean, the point, fundamentally it's a travelogue, and it talks about my exploration of the country. But it's as I travel through the country, I dig up the history and tell the history, tell it from start to finish.
No. Did you read that book by Saramago? He does a similar kind of, I think it's called
I did. It's called Journey to Portugal. And I read it and I refer to it in my book. And it was written in 1986 or thereabouts. And so I thought, this is going to be so fascinating to see what the country was like in 1986. But it really depends if you like Saramago.
Yeah.
And, Saramago won the Nobel Prize, who's obviously good. So what can I say? But
it's not easy reading, let's put it that way.
It's not easy
the translation.
I don't even think he used full stops.
Yeah.
It's just madness how he is a stream of consciousness. Some of his books are very good. Blindness is very good. And the one about Jesus, which was very controversial, I thought was quite good.
Yeah.
But the one about Journey to Portugal, I found
slow,
very challenging, very challenging.
Yeah. But maybe that's his kind of ironic kind of nod towards the fact that you need to take this journey slowly through Portugal.
Maybe I didn't.
And it's full of confusion and no full stops.
I did not. I'm sort of, it's interesting because he starts his book. He starts that journey in a place called, I can't remember, but it's near Miranda do Douro.
Up in the north, isn't it? Northeast,
right.
I think. Yeah.
That's right. And next to Miranda do Douro, which is a tiny little area, and the village he starts in has something like 60 people. I went there because he started his book there. And the village sits atop the Spanish-Portuguese border, but the people don't really consider them Spanish or Portuguese. Wow. And they speak a dialect that goes back pre-Latin. It goes back to sort of Celtic.
More Celtic.
And so, and if you look at the national languages of this country, one of them is, I think it's called Mirandese.
Yeah, it's more towards Galician. It's a little bit more like Galician.
Something, yeah, that's right. And so it's a very ancient language, and the people are very distinctive. There's a special cow. There's a species of cow that is native to that very small portion of Portugal.
That sounds very Celtic. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a steak. I think it's called Mirandese. I can't remember what it's called.
Mirandese sauce is quite famous, I think.
Is it? Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so the book, it tells the history in a very lighthearted way. The idea about the book is that if you are coming to this country to travel, or if you come to this country to live, after reading the book, you will have a complete understanding of the history from start to finish and the geography. And I've had a lot of readers contact me saying, God, I had no idea. I keep stopping the book to write down places to visit because I go through some equally amazing places and equally places that you don't need to visit. And so,
it's fascinating.
I mean, ideas.
One of the interesting facts I've kind of learned about the sort of the conquest of the world, or how else would we call it? And we see a lot of in the art in from that era. They have the galleons, the Portuguese sailing man of wars and stuff like that, and they have the very square sails. When it actually, in fact, that from a sailing perspective, the reason why Portuguese discovered the rest of the world was because they were able to use a different sail, a completely different sail. It's called a lateen sail, and it's more traditional, like a triangular style. So you can sail closer to the wind, which allowed them to follow the route from the Azores to the west, and then follow what they called it, the Alta Norte. Yeah, and basically because a simple sailing technology enabled them to sail closer to the wind, which enabled them to cover much greater distances and quicker. And the boats were much smaller. So it's really interesting. Just the art represents this sailing craft, which is completely incorrect of what actually happened historically. Yeah, very.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, that's obviously we focus on that part of the country of the history because it really showed Portugal, a tiny nation of 3 million people at the time, punching well above its weight. But it was a period that lasted really only 100 or so years. And so the country hangs a lot on there, but the history of the country extends obviously much beyond that. And so it sort of, that moment in time allowed Portugal to get a footing into the global history. and impact global history. Adam Smith named it as one of the two most momentous occasions in human history.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that was very European centric, but he said that and Columbus's discovery of America were the two momentous occasions.
Well, yeah, I guess it shifted power more into, I would say, Christian Europeans, because then you took the trade routes away from going through the Middle East.
Correct. Yeah,
you were able to go a different way. You put the powers in Europe as opposed to in the Middle East. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I can see that point.
Mm. But the country's history is, it's sort of a mixture. There's a lot of tragedy in Portuguese history, which is kind of what makes it amazing. The earthquake's obviously a big thing, but it's been beaten to death and how often it's talked about. But it was a massive event. But then the Napoleon's invasion of this country completely devastated this country.
I never heard of that.
But at the same time, Napoleon's invasion, which seemed unstoppable, I mean, he swept through Spain and swept through into Portugal. He invaded Portugal 3 times and he captured Lisbon. But it was here in Portugal where, I mean, it was largely on the back of the Brits arriving and kind of saving this country. But it was here where they got pushed back, and it was here where Napoleon really took his first punch. And it was so over the course of sort of 3 or 4 years in which he invaded 3 times, he finally got pushed back. The general in charge, the French general in charge, called this area his Iberian ulcer, because he just could not stem the losses. And it was at this point in which the tide against Napoleon turned. And so in 1811, so he invaded initially first invaded in 1807, but then finally got kicked out in 1811, and that's when it all started sweeping back.
Yeah, because I think the army's as good as its supply lines, and I think as soon as you start to cross over the Jerez and all the mountain ranges, and then you got Extremadura in the south, it's you're starting to struggle with supply lines, and then the Brits would just sort of, then the Navy was probably quite strong patrolling, so it knocks off the sea routes. So it might be kind of...
Well, it's interesting because the Brits really adopted a policy of slash and burn. So they would retreat, they would attack, then retreat, and they would retreat behind the Torres Vedras, which in itself is an extraordinary story. The English had created a network of defense across the Torres Vedras, which was just extraordinary.
You can still see it today, can't you?
You can still see it today, and you could send a message. You could send a message from any point to any other point within 8 minutes, and then you had this flag system which you could send. It was kind of like a rudimentary Morse code. They had dams set up where you could remove the dam and it would flood a region. It was never actually tested because the French arrived to the edge and they're like, okay, well, this is completely impenetrable. But what they would do, so the Brits and the Portuguese would attack, then retreat behind that and slash and burn the land that the French would then arrive at. And so you're right, so the French arrived and because we can't sit here because all the farming land was destroyed. But it was because the farming land was destroyed, which was kind of a necessary evil, in why Portugal got so devastated by this invasion.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then, so the whole, Portugal entered the 20th century and indeed entered the 21st century after taking a number of punches. First, it was captured by Spain and they finally won their freedom. Then it was attacked. Then it was devastated by an earthquake, and then they finally rebuilt. Then it was invaded by Napoleon aggressively. And then after 15 or so years after that, he invaded there into a civil war. And so then the 19th century just muddled along, which in the late 19th century, they lost a big portion of their African colonies to the Brits. And then in 1910, their king is murdered and they enter into this very, 1909, the king is assassinated and they enter into this very turbulent period, which ends in the longest dictatorship in the 20th century. I mean, it was just like a 1-2, punch.
And also the part they played in World War II is really fascinating as well, which we don't really hear too much about, how they were supposedly a little bit on the sidelines, but actually they weren't. Helping the Brits set up in the Azores and protecting the Atlantic routes and things like that, and having the great James Bond story of Estoril.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Salazar, for all his faults, he was loved by this country initially because he kept the country out of the war, and he played two sides under immense pressure. I mean, Franco, the whole, as you know, obviously, Ian Fleming was here in Estoril as part of a program called GoldenEye. And the program had anticipated that Franco who was obviously the dictator of Spain, had been offered by the Nazis, look, help us invade Portugal, and you can carve it up and you can take a portion of it. And, there'd been this long history between the Castilians wanting to capture Portugal. And so there was this idea that Franco might indeed do that. And then the idea of Ian Fleming under Goldeneye was that the English would have agents behind enemy lines should that have happened. So Salazar was under enormous amounts of pressure. In the north, he was one of the major sources of tungsten, and tungsten was being used by both the Nazis and the Allies to strengthen the steel in their tanks. And it was an essential component of their tanks. And so he was the main provider of that to both sides. And so the Brits were constantly at him, not to provide us to the Nazis, but he had sort of no choice. And then, as you mentioned, the Azores was a major staging ground for the Allies. Indeed, I think even in D-Day, I mean, a lot of the fleet, a lot of the Atlantic fleet was stationed there.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think it's such an important strategic route when they started to lay sort of early cables as well from Portugal all the way to the US, then you've got that big communications route, and also basically the route that you could do if you needed to sailing to the US or escape or monitoring shipping, because I can imagine like you would have U-boats patrolling around and if it gets to the stage where you have less steam-powered or less diesel-powered boats, then you would have to try to get some supplies in from the US by sail,
Sure, right, sure, yes.
In the long run, it could have got to that.
But, it remains, the Azores remain an important part. There's a large NATO listing station out there.
Okay.
It's the final sort of line of Atlantic defense for NATO. The point is that there's just, and which is obviously true of every country. Every country has its own tragedy and stories. I think Portuguese history is particularly tragic in many ways, but it's just not being told. Yeah. And that was really the thing about my book, is that, God, this history is incredible. And no one's, how many books a year would be written about Paris?
Yeah.
And there were none written about an entire country of Portugal, which was, and, it seemed so inappropriate because so many English people were arriving to this country wanting to know.
Yeah. How's your wife? Sorry, it's a bit of a divergent question, but how old is your wife?
She's 36.
Okay, so she's similar age to Rita. So Rita said to me when she was at school, her mom learned so much about Portuguese history, the kings, the royal family, but when she was in school, she just learned about the communist ideals and stuff. She didn't hear anything about anything prior to communism. So I don't know whether your wife faced a similar type of education of history in when she was at school. I don't know if it was.
She's British. My wife's British.
Okay. Why did I think she was Portuguese?
So unlikely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Unlikely then. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had the idea that she was Portuguese because your son's called Vasco.
Yeah. Well, his first name's Edward, but I like to tell people his middle name's Vasco. I really wanted my next. If we have another son, his middle name would be Afonso.
That's Rita's next name. She's Rita Afonso.
Is it? What's a great name?
Yeah, it is a great name. It's part of the royal family, I think. So.
The first king of Portugal, Afonso Henriques.
Yeah. We're looking at Santiago. I think that's going to be our next name.
Santiago.
St. Thomas. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, let's get back to your book. I was just trying to work out a little bit there because a lot of the history here for what she studied was basically just propaganda.
Sure, and it probably was throughout the 20th century under the dictatorship. I think the reason why I wrote the book was that it seemed like such an obvious thing, such an obvious need, and when I started seeking out publishers, it was reasonably easy to get it across the line because there was a demand. And there is a demand. I mean,
and there's a strong connection between the UK as well. Did you get publishers in the UK or?
I approached publishers in the UK, but my publisher is a Portuguese publisher.
Okay, cool. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a strong connection between Portugal and the UK. It's got the oldest continuous alliance. There's obviously been a lot of trade in the north. It's like a drink and the Portuguese created, so
and also they like the football as well. So, and it's fascinating. No, it's a really cool. It's a cool country. I love living here. You feel really comfortable here?
I love it. I love it. This country is gentle. The people are gentle. It's very easy, it's very easy to integrate here. The fact that everyone speaks English, or a big portion of the country speaks English, is a massive benefit for the country.
Mm.
And, that's a very personal benefit for me, but it's also a benefit for the country as it integrates with the world. There's a common story being talked about how companies coming here and setting up big teams of developers.
Yeah.
If they're speaking a language that the company doesn't know, then that's unlikely to happen. But because everyone speaks English,
Yeah.
it gives them a competitive advantage over, say, Spain, where English isn't as prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
So,
potential,
this country's fantastic.
potential here. It is. It's all good. And I feel very protective as well. It's that double-edged sword, right? There's so much potential, but I also feel very protective of the Portuguese values, Portuguese culture, because it's a lot of the reason why we moved here in the first place. And I don't want to sort of stain the water with my British, although I don't have too much British ways, but I don't want to come here and just want to eat fried breakfast at the local cafe, or you know what I mean, or just drink in an Irish pub or whatever.
No, you got to Albufeira for that. But I mean, that conversation is a gentrification conversation, and that, for instance, interestingly, in my experience, that conversation has been happening much more in the last 6 months than it has ever since I've been here. And I think we are reaching a point of saturation in Lisbon, especially in the historic area, where there's the change is happening so quickly. But everything changes, and life. Portugal is just. Every city has gone through change, and this city now, Lisbon, is now rapidly coming into the very modern world. It's this city is so much more sophisticated than it was 6 years ago, and that sounds derogatory, but it was just the access to. At a basic level, the access to fitness studios and yoga things and all these sorts of things that just did not exist. And maybe, and maybe that suited then. But this city has changed dramatically. The problem with, and this is, the argument about gentrification, it's a common argument, and it's been had over and over again across the world. The thing about the gentrification happening in Lisbon is that there's always winners and losers. The losers in this instance are often the locals and often the Portuguese, whereas gentrification is usually just a slightly wealthier person displacing a slightly less wealthy person of the same culture. In this instance, it's all foreigners displacing local Portuguese, which is I can totally sympathise with the problem that's associated with that.
You can easily see the headline as well, but actually it's much more complicated than that as well, which you would hope that people try to understand, that foreigners coming in, we bring liquidity, we bring money that can come into the economy, and it's usually the middleman and how that is divvied up tends to be the problem, but you need the money coming in. There is no money here, so everybody suffers if there's no money here. So you need the money coming in, but it needs to be invested wisely. It needs to be spread about correctly for the benefit of all. Not just the benefit of a few. I'm not a communist, by the way, but it sounded like it just then.
I mean, obviously you sympathise with that position. Obviously, I mean, I think the real point of contention really stems down to, if you break right down to the thing, is that the house prices are too expensive for locals.
Yeah.
Which is a direct result of wealthy foreigners coming into Lisbon and buying houses up. So the answer is obviously not to ban foreigners, and the answer is obviously not to ban new businesses, which are pushing out old businesses. The answer is, or the problem is, house prices, and the answer is just liberalising supply and allowing supply to really fill that gap.
Yeah, because there's a lot of abandoned houses. Like I walk around.
There's 750,000. There are 750,000 abandoned properties.
Easier to make money freely available for builders and for investors and for Portuguese people to transform their granny's home in Alentejo into a nice holiday home. And I see it all around me. There's plenty of abandoned monts and all kinds of stuff, but there is not the money that people can invest into it. There is no liquidity. It's really hard to get a loan. You can try go down the EU funding routes and stuff like that, but it's just an absolute head fuck and mind fuck with all of the different paperwork that you have to prepare. I think it's simply like that. I mean, you see. I hate to use the USA as an example, but you see a lot of the sort of garage businesses. They start off with just a good idea. Plenty of them fail, but it's these angel investors that come in that have capital, they have liquidity, that they invest in these ideas, and that's what Portugal needs. And I think if you're an income, and many of your audience and many of my audience are going to be people who are either thinking about moving to Portugal, live in Portugal, or even Portuguese that speak English, it's like take your capital and invest in your country, or take the capital, bring it in, and look for investments, not just the usual investments like in places like Lisbon or Porto, but look further afield, expand into the areas like the Alentejo, where you're going to pick up you're going to pick up 2-3 hectares for well under 200,000 euros, which is fantastic, because the services here are great. There are supermarkets opening up. There is highways. If you can get your timing, it's all about timing, I think, with property investment for sure.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that. I think the wealth that's coming into Porto and Lisbon is radiating outwards. Certainly up the coast around Ericeira and down to Azatão, there is so much stuff being built. This country is covered in crayons.
Yeah.
To the benefit of everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, Chris, I think it's been fascinating talking to you, my friend, and I'm definitely going to pick up your book. So can you tell the listeners and the audience where to find your book? And also, maybe we'll leave that link in the show notes. We could actually probably have a direct link to wherever you're selling it. And also to Paco Services. It's pacoservices.com, right? Or .pt?
.pt, pacoservices.pt.
Okay, I'll leave that in the show notes as well. So if anybody needs to understand your relocation services and to have a nice assistant to deal with all the admin, they'll be more than happy to contact you, I'm sure.
And to maximize your life in Portugal, which is exactly. There's so much in this country that
you can go to the beach. Why are you going to go to an office when you can go to the beach?
You don't want to go to CEF. You don't want to go to AMA.
No, exactly. Even if you know where to go.
Yeah, exactly. But to your question about where it can be bought anywhere, really. It's in all good and bad bookstores across the country.
And the title is Meet the Tugas, right? Tugas.
Meet the Tugas, that's right.
What does Tugas mean, by the way?
A tuga used to be a derogatory term for Portuguese, and now it's an endearing term.
Okay.
It was used during the colonial wars in the 70s against the Portuguese soldiers. And it was your effing tuga. And whereas it subsequently changed to an endearing term, meaning a very quintessential, characteristic Portuguese person.
Okay, interesting. I never knew that. That's new to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem, Justin. That's the problem with the title. I'm targeting an English audience, and no one understands what that means. Yeah. I've shot myself. Yeah. But either way.
Yeah, well, you got a subtitle on there, no?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Cool.
But yeah, it's available across the country in bookstores, and it's available online. Yeah,
the bookstores here in Portugal are very popular. Even they have a lot of English books and French books and stuff. It's actually a thriving business here in Portugal. Is the good old fashioned hardcover and softcover paper books.
I think it's a European thing.
Is it? I don't know. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, in New Zealand and Australia, the countries I grew up, bookstores are dying. But across Europe, I find that bookstores are thriving.
Interesting. And I must say, I've stopped reading books on the computer, partly because my eyes are going so bad, but also because we've now got a bigger place here and we can have a library and we just buy paper. That's.
Well, I hope my book appears in your library.
Yeah, it certainly will. Wow, Chris, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It's really been interesting.
Yeah, pleasure. Been good talking to you, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal. Out. Did you know that Portuguese bank accounts can sometimes be frozen by the authorities? As someone who's traveled extensively and now runs a business here in Portugal, I value freedom, seamless usability, and bulletproof security. That's why I can't say enough good things about Revolut. With a Revolut account as your backup, you'll still be able to pay bills, receive payments, and keep everything running smoothly, even if you're not in the country. Revolut gives you multi-currency accounts, lets you spend in over 150 currencies at interbank rates, and provides advanced security features like instant card freeze, disposable virtual cards, and safe online shopping. And an app that's as intuitive as it gets. To help support Podcast Portugal, and if you're thinking about setting up a bank account as a backup, click the link in the show notes to sign up for a new Revolut account. It's a win-win situation. You get all the benefits of Revolut, and every time someone signs up, Revolut rewards Podcast Portugal with €40. Revolut, freedom in your pocket. Sign up today and show your support for Podcast Portugal.
The mystery of the century.